Welcome back. Now, we're still talking about President Tinubu's presentation of next year's budget, at a dual sitting of the National Assembly in Abuja on Wednesday. Let's get fresh insights now. We bring in from Ibadan via Zoom another public finance analyst, Olusegun Elemo, to bear his mind on, all that went down at the National Assembly in Abuja on Wednesday. Thanks a lot for joining us again, Olusegun Elemo. So, as the lawmakers noted, the budget presentation was late in arrival, but was it worth it?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for having me. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the constitutional duty of the president. So no matter the time it comes or he arrives in the National Assembly, I think in the end it works because it's a constitutional duty that must be done. And then, the president certainly also said yesterday that that constitutional provision must be adhered to, and that's what he did yesterday. Yes, it arrived very late. Maybe if it had arrived late November, the lawmakers would have had, sufficient time to review before, going on recess for Christmas and the New Year celebration. Howbeit, the budget has been presented late before the Assembly and the lawmakers, and they now have the duty to look at it. Perhaps maybe they will cut short their recess, stay longer than they would have done, and take time to look at the details of the budget. But I heard Senator Adams Oshiomhole from Edo State yesterday also mentioned that it is not feasible that the oversight activities around the budget proposal will be concluded before the 31st of December. However, he mentioned that he is hopeful that that will be done and concluded possibly before the end of January 2025. And we're also looking forward to that.
All right, so in essence, we are optimistic that the budget cycle will remain from January till December.
Hopefully, yes, because, yesterday also, the National Assembly passed the bill to amend the lifespan of the 2024 budget and extend it to June 30th, 2025, which means that there's no vacuum. The 2024 budget continues to run. So wherever we get to with the fine-tuning of the 2025 budget, we'll still achieve the January to December calendar year, I believe.
All right. So let's look at some factors that that's in this sector. Now we see that security took the largest share, which has been over time. In 5 years, security has taken about 14.5 trillion naira. Education, healthcare, and these are the top three. Have taken the 10 chunk of the budget. Are you optimistic that we will have a budget that will be performed, that will perform well in 2025? And how do you think this will ensure the economy gets better? Looking at the fact that the president also mentioned that they are trying to ensure that the exchange rates, the naira strengthens against the dollar at 1,500 before the end of next year.
Well, I think in terms of budget performance, there's been issues around that. What the people want to see in terms of performance, not the kind of interpretation that the public service gives to budget performance. And I'll give you an example. The interpretation that we give to budget performance, and you heard even during the president's speech, and we need to re-engineer our minds on how we interpret budget performance. It is not directly correlated. Yes, you can say it, but it's not directly correlated to the amount of money that has been spent. It's not performance. I don't see that as performance. What the people want to see, for instance, you have mentioned how much has been spent on security over the last 5 years. But then is that, can you travel by road in the northwest of this country? Can you travel by road 6 straight hours, 10 straight hours in the northeastern part of the country? Can you go freely in the southeastern part of the country? Many people who want to have social function cannot even do that in the southeastern part of the country. So that is performance in terms of security spending. And that's how we should interpret performance. So when the president comes to give the budget speech and then he talks about budget performance, it should not be through the lens of how much money has been spent vis-a-vis the budgetary allocation. Yes, you can say that, but then it is in real terms how better the people are feeling in wherever they are in their communities with regards to sectoral spending. You can relate that to healthcare. You can relate that to education. Out of school children need to feel the impact of spending on education in that regard. And that's what I call budget performance. Now, with regards to, again, budget performance, you would see that the recent reports of the Auditor General, right, from 2018, 2019, 2020, and the recent one, 2021, really speaks to the inefficiencies in public spending. And it is not so much about how much we generate. Yes, we need to generate revenue, and I've heard Paul Alaje spoke on the platform this morning talking about the feasibility of revenue. We will need to generate revenue. But again, is that, and he's also touched about the size of the budget, and we need $100 billion budget over the next couple of years. I agree with that. But again, is that whatever we're spending right now, we need to be as effective as possible, as economical as possible, as efficient as possible. But the data from the audit institution does not speak so much about efficiency of public spending. And I can give you an example. For instance, in the 2021 audit report, which is the latest report of the Auditor General that we have, says about 3.5 trillion not accounted for. And 2.9 of that not accounted for by just 8 ministries, departments, and agencies. And that should give us concern. That should give the president worry. And that, again, reiterates why we need to take the audit institution much more importantly and accelerate the passage of the federal audit bill.
Right. Okay, so we'll come back to that point, that point of what to be done now, especially now that the baton has been passed to the National Assembly now for them to perform their oversight functions, especially on this document. But so in a further breakdown of the budget presentation of Wednesday, how realistic do you think, or do you also share Paul Alaje's doubt as to how realistic the fact that inflation, the president expects that inflation will drop to 15% come next year, and again a projection that the exchange rate would also fall to 1,500 naira per naira to the dollar?
Well, I share some of Paul Alaje's sentiments. The fundamentals, some of the fundamentals are feasible. Some are, we're overreaching ourselves on some. And I think the president and his team need to be a bit cautious. But again, as one of the lawmakers said yesterday, these are just estimates, really. But in speaking to real issues about the budget fundamentals, I think the oil production, the president said 2.06 million barrels per day. It's feasible, considering the momentum that we're gaining in that respect. I think Paul also mentioned that we've moved from 1.4 million to about 1.7 million as at the last figure release. So I think that given the cooperation that we now have, the security cooperation that we have in the oil producing communities, particularly in the Niger Delta area, I think the president has some goodwill in that environment. I think they're cooperating with the president's government in that regard. So I think we can achieve that. Maybe if not 2 million barrels, maybe we can move closer to 1.85, 1.9, and then inch closest to that. So that gives us some feasibility headroom in that regard. But then the exchange rate, I think we might, we might settle around that 1,500. I think the market is also adjusting, even though speculation is still shifting the market in one way or the other. And I have made my proposal severally on this platform and other platforms that you cannot have a dollarized economy and then want to achieve a stable, foreign exchange, market. I think the CBN will need to do more in tightening a little bit further the market. For instance, the access that people have to withdraw foreign exchange over the counter at the bank and in volumes, I think we need to address that, and that can a bit shape, how the market behaves. But more importantly, is our production. And I think that with the Dangote refinery now exporting finished crude, abroad, I think that can enable us, to then stabilize the foreign exchange market a little bit further. In terms of inflation, I think the president is way ambitious on that. You cannot have inflation at 34% right now and then want to achieve slow it down to 15% in how many months? I think it may slow down with the fundamentals that I've mentioned, oil production going up, and then local production, especially with no further import on petroleum products, and then we're now exporting. We can stabilize the market, and then non-oil sector performing a little bit more, the digital economy doing a little bit more. All of that can help us slow inflation further. I think that achieving 15% is unrealistic. Maybe something around 23, 25 is what I'm seeing. But in terms of debt service, I think we're still have an issue with that because the president projected 15.8 trillion, and that will be around 45% of the projected revenue. And that's if we achieve 100% of the revenue target. But given the previous realities of our budget here, where we do about 75 to 80% of revenue, mind you, we haven't even achieved 80% of revenue in 2024. But assuming that we achieve 75% of revenue target in 2025, debt service will be going up to 60%. And that should also continue to worry us. And I think the president touched on that, and he said he's committed to further reducing the percentage of debt service to revenue.
So talking about fiscal responsibility, excuse me, let's talk about, how this proposed budget aligns with Nigeria's fiscal sustainability goals, looking at the fact that we're majorly dependent on oil revenues.
Well, I think, you see, the reality that we have on our hands, because we've shifted too much from our development goals many years before now, and we've decided to focus on oil, getting us back to diversify and improve the non-oil sector to, get the economy and the GDP to where it should be, and then, our per capita income to where it should be really. Is going to take some time. But I think what we should focus on is to get as much as we can from oil and use it properly. And I, again, emphasis on using it properly, because you can get money and just drain it out of the basket. And I think in some respect, with due regard to those in public office, in some respect, that's what we're doing. We're draining the monies, the public funds off the basket. And I think we need to tighten a little bit further so that whatever we are getting, whether from oil and the little we are getting from non-oil sector, we can use that money to diversify the economy, make it a little bit more robust, to be more resilient and more sustainable, and then get the economy growing and growing and growing as fast as possible. The population is bloating up, and we cannot afford to wait. And I think the president also alluded to that. And that's why he's coming up with some of the reforms that he's coming up. I agree with some of the reforms. The National Assembly agrees with some of the reforms, I think, from the speech of the Honorable Speaker of the House of Representatives. We need to reshape our tax system in a way that really collects from those that have and, collects just slightly from those who do not have much. And with that, we can balance, we can equate the economy properly, and everybody can sit where they belong with respect, to their economic prowess. But more importantly is that we need to be efficient in our spending. We need to be effective and economical. And again, is why it is important to strengthen the audit institution and ensure that they play a stronger oversight on the annual budget and enable the budget to deliver its real objectives to the people.
All right. Well, the PDP is also, speaking to this document, saying that the president neglected to reveal the capital and recurrent details of the 2025 budget. Will that be correct?
Well, I don't think that is. I don't think you mean it's a summary. You don't expect the president to then, read everything in his speech. Well, I know that previously you would have the president talk about the capex and the recurring expenditure and the overheads of the budget. But again, the president, it's at his, it's a prerogative of the president. And maybe the handlers of the president didn't want to burden him too much with a long speech and just wanted to touch on some part that they count as fundamentals. In any case, the budget is before the National Assembly and there are PDP members in the National Assembly. Can get the details and get it to their party.
Right. And then the lawmakers, especially from the House of Representatives, have also, ruled that a number of institutions, a number of ministries, departments, and agencies, including, well, like I said, institutions, NECO, University of Ibadan, Ministry of Labor and Productivity, should be removed from the budget because of their trend of failing to honor invitations issued by the House to these, bodies to come and, speak to their financial status and otherwise. They've not done so. It takes us back to the earlier points you made. I said we're going to come back to that point. How far you think this will go in ensuring budget performance by all concerned?
Well, I think in terms of the powers of the National Assembly, I think there's something that needs to be done about the Constitution. Because what the issue is right now is that the National Assembly does not have the powers to remove an agency of government from the budget. Recall that we've had an issue with the Security and Exchange Commission at the time, during the former President Jonathan, where the then Director General, Ms. Haruma Ote, was summoned to the National Assembly, and then she didn't turn up, or there was some kind of exchanges, and then they decided not to then pass the budget of the Security and Exchange Commission. I think there was an issue, but the president then funded the SEC, directly. I don't know where the president got the money from, but then the SEC was funded. What I think should be done fundamentally, there should be some kind of constitutional amendment that empowers the legislators to actually step down the budget of an MDA that flouts the instruction of the National Assembly. And that amendment should then also touch on the president not having the power to then fund that agency of government, as long as the National Assembly does not authorize it. So I think that there's some part of the Constitution that needs to be addressed in that regard. But more importantly is the issue that we have raised, that people can go on and on and on for years and continue to spend public funds. And when they are now requested to come and account for how they have used public money, they find it difficult, extremely difficult to do that. And in some cases, you will now see that the National Assembly is powerless in the amount of enforcement that they can initiate, in the amount of discipline, fiscal discipline now that they can set in motion. And even though the President of the Senate did mention yesterday that they have their powers, yes, they do have their powers, but with, for instance, 2.9 trillion not accounted for by just 8 ministries, departments, and agencies. And when I mean not accounted for now, there were revenues due to the Federation, they did not collect it. There were taxes due to the Federation, they did not collect it. And you cannot say, because rationally, I don't want to believe that they willingly did not want to collect it. Something must have gone wrong somewhere. If somebody collected it and refused to then return it to Treasury or something. But the National Assembly will need to look at it in detail and investigate it further beyond what the Auditor General.
There is also the issue of failing to remit again.
Absolutely, absolutely. There were different issues, contract, issues, award of contract, not following due process, abandoned contract, not remitting revenue. There were a number of issues, 28 of them actually are cross-cutting issues in the 2021 report of the Auditor General. I think these are things that should, not should, but does tell us that we are not as efficient as we should be in terms of how we manage our public resources.
Right, and the tax reform bills, are bound to correct that, do you reckon?
Well, the tax reform bill will not correct how we manage our public finances. It will only correct the distortionary setup in the tax administration. Yes, you will now collect more revenue. Yes, you will now have central posts. Yes, you will now be able to disburse in a way that is more effective. But how do you use it? I think those are the real issues. It's not much about how much you collect. You can collect as much as possible, which is what I envisage will happen in 2025. We'll collect more money, but then how do you use it? Because how you use it is what determines the impact that the people feel.
Right. There's also another concern that it was raised earlier. The two analysts we've spoken to said even the highest agencies, ministries getting what now is still not sufficient. And there's also the concern of, will the government even release them? Is that, a legitimate concern in your opinion? And is that also bound to change now? That is one thing for the government to announce that, agencies will get this and that. But eventually, there's also the need for government to not pay lip service and ensure that all these ministries get their due amount as at when due.
In terms of whatever MDAs are allocated in the budget, like I said, and everybody knows, budget is an estimate. Even when it is enacted and signed by the president, it's still an estimate. It's not, it should have been that the president and his team execute to the letter because it's a law. But in reality, is that it is subjective because it's dependent on revenue inflow. And if the revenues don't come in, there's nothing you can do about that. And I think that's also why, for instance, yesterday, the president mentioned that the CapEx component of the 2024 budget has achieved only about, less than 50%. Less than 50%. And that's why the lawmakers have also now said, okay, let's extend the lifespan of the budget, such that the items in that budget, the capital components in that budget will not be abandoned, and actors can take it forward and still implement some of this as revenue inflows come. Now, in terms of what MDAs get, recall, that they don't have issues with their recurrent spend. So you will actually zero down the recurrent portion of the budget so that all the monies are released. What you have is the capital component of the budget. And it's sad, really, that we are not able to fund our capital component of the budget as we should in a timely manner that enables us to close the financial year as we should, rather than extending the financial year by another 6 months. For the 2025 budget, I think the spending on health is still far below the Abuja Declaration of 15%. And the spending on education is also still way below the UNESCO recommendation. Howbeit, it's increased in Naira terms, but we hope that we will even be able to release what has been allocated to these sectors, because it is in releasing the funds that we can now monitor how those who are responsible to implement whatever objective of the budget is, monitor them, enable the National Assembly to also play their own oversight role, enable the Auditor General to also play its own oversight role, and the people who also exercise social accountability on how they will use the money. But ultimately, the responsibility is that of the policy actors who use the resources in a way that benefits the people.
Absolutely. All right, Olusegun Lemo, that will be all for now. Thanks a lot for joining us on the program today. If we don't find a way to bring you back on the show before Christmas, Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you very much.